excited to be with you, and he just set the bar really high, ending with all of the awards I've been lucky enough to achieve. Hopefully today, though, you see why, right? And a big thing I believe about really leadership and about the outcomes that we get from it. You know, all of these accolades, I think we get them when we show up the right way and how we need to show up and lead the way that we need to lead. And in UT's world, that means I design programs that our clients and their leaders really need, right? So we fill gaps in their leadership skills by sitting down with custom clients and companies and talking about how can we help you and your people develop. So I think I get those things because I'm actually good at my job. And when I get them, it's awesome. But again, I think the most important thing is just loving what you do. And Paul's known me for about a handful of years. Julie, I think you've known me for a little longer, right? Julie's a part of our LDP team. And I'm happy to get to know many more of you. I want to tell you just a little bit about me because I came back to the University of Tennessee for my dream job. I was a low graduate student on the bottom of that totem pole a decade or so ago. And I was studying industrial and organizational psychology. Does anyone know what that means? Yeah, you guys, this is a pattern. I just talk a mouthful of stuff that makes no sense, starting with my degree, then my job title. But industrial and organizational psychology, y'all, my specialty is in human behavior and how it impacts the workplace. Right? So my focus is on individual differences, team dynamics, leadership, and motivation. Well, I didn't love it, I guess, as much as I do now the day I chose to leave the university. But I took a job in Boston. I designed with my colleagues a business program in a liberal arts context that within 2.5 years became the largest major on campus. And then I got this phone call. I was freezing my tail off in my apartment in Boston, and I got a call that said, "Hey, Dr. Scott, your dream job is about to open. We can't guarantee you the job, but we can guarantee you an interview." And I was like, excuse my English, hell yeah. Okay? That was a good day, y'all. That was a good day. And I came back down to the university. I made fun of the people just enough that we realized we were probably going to be a good fit for one another, and somehow I got the job. And I've been back in my dream job for just about under 9 years. And on some very realness, it is most definitely my dream. I literally wake up every day feeling lucky that I get to do what I do for a living. Because when I told Dr. Cheryl Barksdale, that some of you probably know, when I told Cheryl that she had my dream job, she thought I was crazy. But she turned around and asked me, well, why? And I said, you have the opportunity to work with the leaders of today and translate their knowledge into the skills that are needed for the leaders of tomorrow. And you get the opportunity to be in that classroom, and you can close a skill gap, develop a pipeline in a way that the average faculty member can't do. And she remembered that, and so 9 years later, I got that phone call. Right? So I'm really happy to be with you because 9 years ago I wasn't thinking of opportunities like this. This wasn't listed in my job description. And some of these things are some of the most fun when I get to work with people in my community and share my experience in hopefully ways that make the community leaders, where I call home, right, make us all better. And so that's really my goal for today. Any way I can help you and support you in what you're doing, I am more than happy to. You're probably going to recognize a pattern about me too, right? I just told you about my dream job, how I love investing in people, leadership development. Well, I found out that is probably a real thing about me because about COVID, I went nuts and I started getting chickens. Yeah. Y'all, you can drive over to Halls later and you can meet all these characters. But yeah, y'all, I started getting chickens. Anybody know what kind those are? Fuzzy ones, that's what I call them too. Yes, but they're silkies, and so they're fuzzy, they have an extra toe, they've got this little blue thing behind their ear, and they don't have feathers, and so they can't really fly because their wings are short, and so they're short, fuzzy, cute chickens that my dog Dudley tries to chase. But I had no idea, you couldn't sex a chicken early, so if you ever do make it out to Halls, I got a bunch of roosters running around. Yeah, but they're super and duper. I do think they're cute. I realized that I got into gardening after COVID. I got a couple pigs, and then I started getting lilies. And those lilies I grew from bulbs. And so as I look at myself and what Nancy's about, I started to realize I actually kind of like hard work. and I like investing into things. And I'm able to be patient and wait for the payoff so I can see the beauty later after putting in that hard work. And so to me, that just relates to so much what it's like for all of us on our leadership journey, because growing as a leader takes work, right? It requires us to get dirty, get uncomfortable, right? And so I'm going to require that of you today, to push yourselves and do that. The things I know, kind of one of those reasons, some of those accolades, I've been honored enough to earn them. Y'all, what I know is how adults learn. And it is not, right, the methods that we typically use in an undergraduate classroom. It's not go read a textbook and take a test on it. That is not how adults learn. Adults learn by getting exposed to a little bit of new information. I'm going to expose you to just a little bit. Some of you are going to be like, shh, you should have told us more. Okay? But I'm going to tell you a little bit about leadership and get you thinking about it. And then we're going to do it. Right? And then we're going to spend more of our time talking about what you've just done. Because adults learn by getting exposed to something new, practicing it, and reflecting on their practice. So that's the model that I've used to design today's session. Don't worry, as you look at these dots, some of you do look deeply fearful already. Okay? We are not going to play Twister. Okay? I will tell you that now. You are safe from Twister. But what we might do might even be harder than Twister. Right? We're going to see, because leadership isn't a game, right? And leadership, I say all the time, y'all, it's common sense, but it's not always common practice, right? And sometimes that comes out when we get in opportunities and spaces where there is not a defined leader. And today there's going to be no leader. So we're going to do a lot of talking about what does leadership look like when it needs to be shared. Right? How do we step up? How do we step down? How do we make space for others? And ultimately, when we don't have that title, how do we go about influencing people, right, to get things done? Right? If we can't make them do it, how do we encourage them to want to do it? That's the kind of conversation we're going to have today. Sound good? Awesome, y'all. So our goals for today, number one, I want us to have a good time. And I probably should have put that lower, but fun is first, right? I want us to have fun. Number two, I want us to get out of our comfort zone so that you have a deeper understanding of what leadership means to you, right? And how you show up as a leader, right? And number three, my third goal is we're going to talk 4 primary or core skills of leadership in 2025. So my last goal for today is to encourage you to think about which of those 4 skills might be your strengths and potential development areas. I hope everybody walks away thinking about what could you do more of, less of, or slightly different as a result of our 90 minutes together. And if you get those 3 things out of today, y'all, I think I've won. And I'm going to go home and listen to those roosters and be super happy about those crows at all hours of the day. Right? Now, coffee talk at your table. What was her name from Saturday Night Live? Coffee talk, right? But I want you to do, is it Kathy? I think that maybe was her name. But I want you to do a little coffee talk at your table, right? Share what leadership means to you with the people sitting around you, right? I want you to think about what does it mean to you, and I want you to share your ideas with your small group. Roll your chairs, do a little coffee talk. 5 minutes, what does leadership mean to you?
Children's Advocacy Center.
Oh, awesome. I'm ecstatic that I got to eavesdrop your conversations, right? I heard discussions around the differences between leadership and management, right? I heard challenges around leading a multi-generational workforce, right? I heard people talking about challenges of getting people to do it because they want to versus feeling like you got to drag them and an elephant and everything behind you forcing them to do work. I heard tables talking about personality differences and how being a good leader, we've got to know our people and navigate those differences. You had some very, very real conversation around what leadership is, right? If we thought about defining it, did anybody talk about a definition? What would be some components of our definition?
Tony had a good one.
All right, Tony, on the spot, Tony.
Proprietary information.
Let's get our phones out and record it now.
I'm an executive coach.
Awesome.
And the definition I use with my clients is someone who stands in the future for the group. Classically, like Martin Luther King, I've been to the mountaintop. I've seen the promised land. Let me tell you about the way that makes you want to get there.
I love it, Tony. You've got the future-oriented nature of leadership. Absolutely. You're even speaking to the criticality of a vision. And it's always been important. But we might argue in today's time, the VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. Our people need what because of it? Direction, and they need a vision. Right? You're on to something. What else does leadership mean to you? Yeah.
So setting that vision, but saying thank you at the end.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. The vision gets us started, but doing the work Rome wasn't built in a day, right? This is going to take over time. People are going to actually get demotivated on the way. So you're really getting at that, I end up calling it a 5-to-1 leadership style. And research shows that we should be 5 times as positive as we are negative, right? 5 times as positive. Yeah, I like it. Y'all should be writing that down, all right? 5 times as positive we are negative, right? And that is with one individual, right? That is Greg experiencing Nancy 5 times as positive as he does negative over the course of his relationship with her. The closer we get to that number, the more apt people will listen to our feedback and believe. Why? Because they believe it's coming from a place of we really want the best for them. And think about if our leadership style was the other way. Our people experience us 5 times as negative. They only see us when they're here to beat us over the head. That could be quite dangerous. So you're onto something. I didn't get your name, though. Janet, I like it, right? What else were in your definitions of leadership? So there's future-oriented piece. There's definitely a people piece. Anything else?
Teacher?
What?
Being a teacher?
Yes, I say all the time, leaders, they serve so many roles, put on so many hats at once. They are teachers, they are learners, they are leaders, they are everything. Sometimes you feel like you're someone's parent in a leadership role, right? But you're on to something, right? And so we think about the balance that a leadership requires and the awareness that requires. Sometimes that means we've even got to ask, what hat am I wearing for this person today? You know, look at how many heads just shook at that. Yeah, I love it. That means y'all asking yourself that question, right? What does this person need, and what does that mean for how I flex my leadership style? So we start putting it together, and those heads shaking simultaneously. Y'all, you're getting me to think about effective leadership is meeting people where they are, right? And your table in particular had amazing conversation around that, right? But meeting people where they are, right? But before we can do that, right, we've got to have some skills. Right? And we've got to have some awareness so that we can even more effectively meet them where they are. Now, I kind of wanted to collapse ways to look at leadership, right? And so here's mine. It's not make it right, right? Tony and I might be saying some similar things, but some different things, right? Paul might add his definition could look a little different, and that's okay. You know, it's not about us leaving this space with one common definition. Heck no, that's not the goal, right? But if we can understand maybe what should be in the definitions, right? But leadership is about getting people to do it because they want to, not because they have to. And many of your tables talked about that struggle, right? And when we translate that, that's what I mean by influence. Right? Influence. We are influential when we can get people to change what they're doing, how they think, how they feel. Getting someone to change their values is possible, but a good bit harder, right? But influence, fundamentally, we are influential. We can get people to change, right? The process piece. Oh, you nailed it. Rome wasn't built in a day. This happens over time, right? Leadership is not a position and it's not a one-off act. It's the day in and day out. And guess what, y'all? We are not the only people in that process, right? They're the followers in it, right? That process is occurring between people. So let me ask you a question. Who really makes the choice? Is it the leader or the follower? Who? Oh, Krista, why?
How else does it get done? I mean, somebody can preach what needs to be done, but in the end, the doer is that.
Absolutely, right? They can look at us in our face and smile and nod and tell us they're going to do it. You guys have lived that one, okay. Yeah, I didn't even have to finish. Paul was like, I know. But they can smile and nod. And that's actually resistance when they don't go and do and change their behavior. right? And so sometimes that resistance can be active, it can be passive, right? But they're making the choice if they want to follow us, right? And I loved it. I was laughing over here like, sometimes we've been put in these roles, which the choice has already been made, right? They're like, you're the leader, we're going to follow you. And Abby's like, I didn't even know this. We're like, do it, right? But ultimately, they're having the choice. Maybe they put you in the role because they see your potential to give the group what they need, right? But it occurs between people. And Tony nailed it, right, y'all? His definition was both eloquent and very rich into the future piece. Leadership is future-oriented, right? What he called vision, y'all, I translate down into goals, right? But we influence people to achieve goals. And y'all, the only reason they need us is because we need them to act a little different. If we were getting people to do the same thing the same way every day, we are redundant and not needed. Right? Thus, the last piece of leadership, it's an influence process between people to achieve goals through change. Right? And my gosh, y'all, what is change that's done to us like? Describe a word. What was change done to me? I say no to that, by the way. Give me a word. Why would Nancy say no? Painful? Yeah. Change done by you feels like what? Progress, empowerment, right? Automatically, if I get to do the change and I'm excited about it, I'm going to feel this ownership, right? So I ask you that so we can remember, y'all, there's an emotional component, right? You're going to be leading robots, but for many of us now, it's still people, and those people come with emotions, right? And we've got to be able to read those and leverage those and kind of harness those for progress towards that vision, right? Now, this is the definition we're going to kind of keep in the back of our heads, recognizing the key components, right? It's about influence, not making people. It's about influencing them towards a future, and we remember they have a choice, right? So who we are and what we do impacts every single day whether or not they are going to say yes to you. Every day. And I wish, again, common sense, not common practice, right? I wish that we remembered these little things, but every single day people are asking themselves, can I trust Krista? Okay? And if the answer is yes, they're more apt to follow her. But people watch our behavior and they intuit our motivations, they intuit our reasonings. They can kind of come up with their own stories of why we do things. But fundamentally, as people, they are watching us and listening to us, judging our credibility. Can I trust this person? Right? So who we are and what we do matters because people are watching. And if we don't give a consistent message, they're going to make one. Right? And we run the risk of those messages not lining up, and then all of a sudden we're really pulling people behind us instead of that weight of that pull is going to get heavier and heavier the more confusing those messages are. So if we think about who you are and how you need to be, right? There's only one other place in the country I would work if it was not the University of Tennessee. I guess I'd be unemployed. I need to think about this. But it would be the Center for Creative Leadership. Right? They do a lot of great research because they've just got a big team. And it's all leadership development focused. Well, CCL, so Center for Creative Leadership, they've identified 4 core skills for today's times. Here's where I disagree with them, y'all. Their research is focused on early career leaders. I work with senior leaders. I work with leaders at all levels, early career, late career, it doesn't matter career, right? And what I'll tell you is all 4 of these skills are needed. Right? I don't think they go away at all. Right? I hope that they become ingrained and embedded in who you are and in your leadership style. Now, the first core skill is self-awareness. Right? Self-awareness. Right? And some of your brains might have automatically went to emotional intelligence. Right? Because that's one of the core aspects. This is one of the 4 core components of emotional intelligence. But we need to be aware of our emotions. Right, in the emotional intelligence context. But there's a lot more. Right? What else do we need to be aware of about ourselves, particularly in a leadership role? What else we need to know? Not just our emotions, but what else?
Our abilities.
Yes. Yes. Oh, we need to know what we're good at and what we're not so good at. Right? If we don't know that about ourselves, I would begin to question, how do we know that about our talent? And how are we going to be able to use them to fill the gaps that are needed? Right? If we don't know what we're good at, not so good at, how can we even set up effective processes to help ourselves shine? Right? Like, I am terrible with details. Right? I had no idea how many of you were going to be in this room. I asked that question about 2 weeks ago. Paul gave me an answer, and I was like, let's roll with it, baby. Right? We get here, and I'm asking them 9 million questions. I bet Paul, I mean, you were super patient with me. Paul could have been like, hey, we covered this. You forgot this detail. Here's this detail. And by the way, you spelled that wrong. Right? And so I am deeply aware, right, that I am not good at detail orientation. I'm not a highly structured individual. But as Leadership Development Programs Director at the University of Tennessee, I stack my team with people who have a high level of detail orientation, right? And I serve my role as the innovator and the strategist. And then I let my team take over because I know their skills and I know they can fill my gap. And those things don't happen if we don't know ourselves, our strengths, our weaknesses, emotions, y'all, our triggers. I don't think you were there, Julie, but I one day got really mad at my team, threw a eraser, said the F word, and walked out. I'm not telling you I'm a good leader. No. What I'm telling you is that I'm human, right? And that day was a major wake up for me to realize, oh my gosh, Nancy, you need to do a better job of knowing your trigger. And so I sat down and realized my trigger is the same mistake being made after we have talked about it in a very short time. So to turn around and make the same mistake, I realized that was my trigger. And then I realized it is not okay to behave the way you just behaved once you've been triggered, right? So what was a terrible moment, I could use as an opportunity to develop and grow as a leader, and particularly grow my self-awareness. But if we don't know what ticks us off and our hot buttons are people going to push them, right? And you might be the person throwing erasers and saying the F-bomb and running out, okay? You need to know what triggers you, right? You need to have the awareness of if your behavioral response is productive or unproductive, right? And we got to be able to call ourselves on it. If our behavioral response is unproductive, we've got to catch ourselves and then I put a new behavior in. That requires in itself almost constant self-awareness. So I'm going to encourage every one of you to think right now about the process that you have as a person or as a leader to slow down and reflect on what you were doing. Does anybody have a process? A reflection process? Anybody do anything consistent around it? Oh, that's a growth area. All right. Let me tell you a little bit of story, maybe motivate you. So, I was coaching a female leaders, ladies, and I know we are not the only people in a household that does a dish, by the way, but I just want to say. So I'm talking to this female leader, and she says, Nancy, I'm really upset. My dishwasher's broken. And I was like, well, why is that such a big deal? And she was like, well, it's going to take a few weeks. That means I've got to do the dishes. And I'm like, well, why are you that upset about the dishes? And she said, well, it's because that's actually the time of day I typically would go on my walk and I reflect on my day. And I just asked her a simple question. I go, is there any way you can reflect while doing the dishes? She was like, let me give it a shot. I got a phone call 3 weeks later, and she said, Nancy, my dishwasher's fixed. I was like, why is this a bad thing? And she goes, well, I was just now kind of liking that reflection while I was doing the dishes thing. Right? Now, please know she went right back to her walking, right, because she ultimately loved that. But what I'm telling you is, right, we've got to think about what works for us. For some of us, maybe it's while we're doing the dishes. Maybe it's while we're walking the dogs. Maybe it's while we're driving home. Maybe it's the last 5 minutes before we leave our office and we ask, how did I contribute to today's success, right? What were my challenges today? What are my top 3 priorities for tomorrow? Right? But it's going to be really hard for us to grow self-awareness as a skill if we as people are not finding time to actually reflect and grow that awareness. Make sense? All right? Please, I'm going to encourage you, find 5 minutes a day. Where can you find it? Right? My personal trainer, I'm trying to lose 70 pounds. And his mantra to me is, Gary goes all the time, you can invest in yourself for 20 minutes, Nancy. And I'm like, thanks for calling me on my BS, man. You're right, I can. Okay? So I get to call you on y'all's. You can find 5 minutes to reflect. If I can find 20 minutes to go to the gym, you can find 5 minutes to reflect. Now, y'all, communication. We're really going to hit the next 3 in today's exercise. But communication matters. So many of you, as I was eavesdropping, you were kind of talking about how critical communication is, particularly around starting the need for a vision, right? But after we communicate a vision, what else as a leader? What else do we communicate? How else should we be communicating? Because it doesn't stop at the vision. Oh, who said that? I like it, right? That's not what you're saying, right? That's helping other people get their voice. That's a great way to look at communication.
2 ears, 1 mouth.
Yes, and for an extrovert, that's actually extra challenging. You know, and Susan Cain, there's a great book for those of you. You can tell I'm not really introverted, but for anyone that is, right, or you're an extrovert and you want to try to leverage introverted tendencies, it's a fantastic book, Quiet by Susan Cain. Right? But we now really begin to understand how critical that more introverted skill set of asking good questions and listening to the answer. Right? Common sense, not always common practice. Right? So we're talking listening, asking questions. What else about communication? What? Guidance, right? We've set the vision. Now you're really talking, we got to give the direction. Table over there was talking about the criticality of setting expectations. Right? Absolutely. Well, when we think about communication, clarity matters. Consistency matters. Right? I want us to think about conciseness matters, of course. But ultimately, knowing your audience matters. Oh, Nicole, I love that energy. You got to come off mute. Yeah. Well, what got that out of you so quickly?
Just knowing your people,
Yeah.
being able to speak to them in a way in which they understand and you understand.
Yes, absolutely. Right? Nicole is going to be a lot more influential as a leader if she knows that Gary likes data and Nancy makes decisions off emotions. Right? She can present the same thing in 2 different ways to get towards her goal. And that only happens if you know your audience and then adapt and tailor your message to what matters to them. Right? And then think about if we add the asking questions and listening to that. Wow, awesome. Right? Influence. Influence. I know I've used the word already, and that's how it's the nature of leadership, how we define it, right? But what I'm talking about there is really, y'all, there's a component of persuasion and motivation. Persuasion and motivation. To be persuasive and to motivate others, right? What do you have to know about them?
Makes them tick.
Yes. Yes. What is your name? I got to know.
Rick.
Rick?
Greg Rowe.
What? Greg Rowe will be teaching the rest of class. Rick will be, yeah, you're on it though, Rick. Yes, right? You're absolutely on it. Now, people are asking the what's in it for me question. And I know that sounds deeply self-serving and frankly it is. But we're human and we lead humans. And the what's in it for me question is important. We've got to be able to understand them so that we can answer that question. That will make it more persuasive. And then, y'all, that's not the only question, but we got to answer what's in it for us too, not just what's in it for me. And that's a little different than what's in it, individual contributor versus a leader. The individual contributor is only focused on what's in it for me. The leader needs to be focused on what's in it for each of them, but ultimately what's in it for us. Right? And we've got to communicate that too. Right? But if our people don't share the same values, right? If they're not bought into the direction, all of those things, making that connection gets a whole lot harder to persuade and motivate, right? If we think about motivation, is it just, the almighty dollar? No. What else is involved in motivation?
Good work culture.
Good work, yeah, and a culture that recognizes and does what?
Praises, possibly publicly if someone enjoys that or
Yeah.
privately.
I like what you did, Wendy, right? If someone enjoys that, it shows me go back to the awareness piece. We got to know our people. But we also recognize in public, criticize in private, but then with the recognition piece, knowing some people don't even like the public piece, right? But recognition becomes a piece of the culture that can instill motivation, right? There are actually 5 levers to it. Oh, skill variety. As I talk through this, I want you to think about, hey, does any of this, could you widen this to how you might motivate your folks? Could you widen your approach? But skill variety. We might not have any money, but we can get people doing something they don't do every day so they're not bored on their job. Skill variety, one of the 5 intrinsic levers of motivation, right? Task significance. Anybody work in healthcare? I kind of feel like it's there, it's built in. But some doctors and nurses tell me, no, I think you're making an assumption about it. Not everybody's as bought in as you think, right? But task significance. People need to feel like what they do, it's important. There's a purpose to it, right? And I ask about healthcare because there's some studies that show that the janitorial staff, right? When the leaders communicate with them differently, the hospitals see different readmission rates are lower because leaders are saying, hey, you're not just sweeping the floor, right? You're actually keeping disease from spreading that helps our patients from having to come back over the same issue, right? And that's a great example of making people who might not feel like their work is important and meaningful, help them see that it is, right? And that's leadership communication, y'all. That's you figuring out what that person does and how it fits to that vision and taking that moment to recognize it. Oh, that's free stuff. It just costs you a little bit of time and energy. But skill variety, task significance, task identity. I love the Air Force, and I go to quite a few bases during the course of the year, and this is the biggest challenge I see. Oh, we've got people building airplanes that never see what they look like, right? Task identity. We are motivated when we see how our work closes out, right? And that feeds right into the next one, y'all, feedback, right? So that's where Aaron can say, hey, Nancy, you did this. Here's how the client received it. Here's how you could do a slightly better job next time, right? But you can give me task identity and feedback at the exact same time to close the loop for that person, right? But task identity, task significance, feedback, skill variety. I want you to think about how you can leverage those to become more motivational. None of that is the carrot and the stick, right? All of that is about figuring out how do we help this person feel important and significant through how we communicate, right? I want to talk a little bit about persuasion. Common sense, not common practice, right? And let me know if you want some extra reading on it. I love the great book by Robert Cialdini. He's got a book called Influence. Anybody in the sales world, he's got a book called Persuasion, which is super interesting, but I'm not in sales, but it gives you a lot of cool techniques. But what we know from his research around influence, not necessarily the sales side, right? There are 6 different principles that psychologically we respond to, right? You want to become more influential, you know? Number 1 principle, similarity. We like and will follow people that we think are similar to us. Right? Similarity. We will follow people that we like and think are similar to us. How do you now that you know that, how do you put yourself in a position to use that? How do you make yourself or help your people see that you are similar to them? Listen, I love it. Common sense, not common practice. What else? What else?
You have to know them, but you also have to share.
Yes.
What the similarity.
Yes.
It's conversation.
Absolutely, Hall. And I'm going to add the word vulnerability to that, right? You know, and we can be vulnerable and find connections with people and talking through, you know, whatever it really is. And I'm not saying you've got to share your deepest, darkest secrets to your people, right? That's not really what I'm talking about. But people respond to similarity, right? And a lot of times, right, it can start with, and I've hated it when I've seen these things, but I've gone into places, and I don't see it today, but I've gone into places where all the women sit together. And all the men sit together, right? And it's like these, you've seen it? Yeah, it's kind of these visual fault lines. But often that happens because we just sat next to people, all right, you're kind of similar to me. You're probably going to get me because we're both women. Cool, right? And we very quickly make these processes. Right? So I want you to think about, how do you make a connection? How do you show again similarity that's not related on the stuff we can see? Right? Connect to your people on similarity in values, similarity in motivations, similarity in work ethic, right? And so Krista nailed it. For us to go deeper than this kind of similarity, that requires a conversation. Right? And when we look at admired leaders and credibility, y'all, one of the big things that the average admired leader does is they don't just know your people. That's what we said earlier. But they appreciate them. Right? So I want you to think about what appreciating people for both their similarities to your values and differences and the uniqueness that they bring. Right? So I'm really going to encourage you to, again, relationships matter. Right? Think about a relationship in your world that you think you could better leverage similarity to better build that relationship, to build trust within it, right? But similarity matters, liking matters, right? People will listen to those that, again, they trust, like, and respect. Make some sense? All right, y'all. Let's talk the last one, and then we're gonna see how you communicate and how you influence. The time is almost here, but the last skill, and this is probably the newest. The concept of agility hasn't been around for decades. The way that we know, how critical self-awareness, emotional intelligence, communication is. Learning agility is a good bit newer, but there's strong research that points to learning agility. It differentiates organizational performance, particularly team performance, and we're really beginning to look around individual learning agility now. Right? But when we think about agility starts with the ability to I'm going to say, read the room. Y'all, social awareness. You got to read the dynamics. Right? That's the first piece. We actually call that, in our world, we call that insight. So we can't move and be agile if we don't read the room. It all starts with this insight piece, right? Once we've read the room, then we use what's called dexterity. And that's us as leaders changing, right? That's the organization changing. But dexterity in leadership, that's often shown through what? The adaptation of our leadership style. Right? So I'm going to be more task-focused with Gary, and I'm going to be more people-focused with Julie. Right? Doesn't make me a bad leader, doesn't make me an unfair leader. It makes me an agile leader that's meeting the person with my leadership where they are. Right? So dexterity, the actual ability to change your style and your behavior in that moment, to meet that person where they are. And the last component of agility is resolve. Y'all, the ability to do that over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. I'll stop with that. Okay? But resolve is critical because, again, leadership is a future-oriented process. And we've got to do that adaptation over and over. And so some of your brains probably went to the concept of resiliency when I said resolve. And I hope so, because we've got to build that resiliency to be able to do it over and again. Because some people say, that personality type really wears me out. I'm getting kind of tired of that, right? And so there are emotional demands of leadership, and so resolve is equally important. So if we go back and thinking about insight, dexterity, and resolve, right? Y'all, fundamentally, it is that the core of that is about learning from our experience and adapting in better ways from it. Okay? So again, it's going to be really hard for us to develop learning agility if we don't have a reflection process. Right? So self-awareness and learning agility, right, they go hand in hand. It's going to be really hard for us to develop agility if we're not slowing down to reflect. So I point that out so maybe you get double bang for the buck as you think about what your reflection process is going to look like. You can enhance 2 of these 4 skills just by one small change. Make sense? Thoughts, questions, comments, concerns about these 4 skills? Anything that comes to your mind about them? Yeah.
So you're in a situation where you have an employee and they don't respect you you should be in your position, and they've gone over your head to say, I don't like what she's doing, how do you handle a situation like that?
That's an awesome question, right?
Big one.
It's a big one. Yeah. I'm leaving. Session over. No. All right, so, no, really though. Okay. One of the first things that come to my mind is right. Number one, they're showing an exceptional lack of political skill to go above you, right? But when I let that go, because that's one of my triggers too. Okay. When I do let that go, a question I would have for you is, what have you done to try to understand why? Right? And then ultimately, I'm going to remind you as a leader, okay, that you are the leader, right? I don't want you to constantly, walk around bullying the title, right? But to a certain extent, right, you've got to say, hey, I appreciate and understand that you don't think I'm the person that should be in this leadership role. But unfortunately, right, that's how it is, right? So the best way for us to work together is, number one, going forwards, you will speak to me about your concerns, about my ability as your leader, right? And number two, I'm just kidding, I'm going to make a punishment joke, but but I would really have a one-on-one conversation with them. The next thing I would encourage you to do is, I would get that leader involved to make sure they reinforce your boundary that what they did is not okay. Because if they allow it, they're going to keep doing it. Yeah, and that's also a question. You really, really want some focused guidance, we can talk one-on-one about every detail. Yeah, cool. Awesome. Anything else come to mind? And I do that for any of you, y'all. If you ever want to shoot me an email hey, this challenge is happening, shoot me a text. I'm more than happy to talk with you. Okay. All right, let's put it to practice. Get up. Get up, get up, get up. All right, so I promise you we are not playing Twister. Okay? What I need, we've got 2 boards. I need about half of you on this board and the other half on this. Oh, need my phone for the timer.
There's a mystery gift.
Oh, y'all got to see Paul. Paul knows what he wrote. You guys might get a little lucky. All right. Thank you. Good job, everybody. So, your task is this. Okay? We've got 2 game boards. Your numbers are different. Okay? Paul and I did not set up anything weird. We promise you, he didn't skip a number. So please don't try to, read through anything extra. Right? Everything here, we were legitimately trying to set you up for success. There are a certain number of numbers on each board. Okay? I'm not going to tell you how many, and Paul isn't either. That's part of the task. Okay? But there's a certain amount of numbers on each board. Your task as a team, your task is to touch the numbers. Touch, defined by, you can step on it with a foot, you may touch it with a finger. That's touch. Okay? Your task as a team is to touch all of the numbers in sequential order. If you miss a number, you're going to get a 5-second penalty. If more, now here's the hard part, okay? The second way to earn a penalty, if more than one person on your team is in the game board, right, you get a 5-second penalty. So that could look like 2 people go in your board and try to find the number 2 instead of one person getting in and touching it. That mistake on your board could look like 2 people coming in and touching the number 74 at once. Okay? That could look like the person who's touching 74 and the person's going after 75 at the same time. You may only have one person in the game board at one time. Go ahead, Paul. Yep.
Can we move our spot?
I'll answer that one. The only thing I will not allow you to move is you may again touch the numbers and get out of the square. You may not move the numbers. If you want to move the people, you may move the people. Yeah. But you may not move my numbers. The only thing you may do is go in that square to touch them and get out of that square. Okay? All right. We're going to do 3 rounds. Okay? And we're going to see how fast you can do it. Okay? So your first round is your tester round. It's going to give us our baseline. Right? What do you need to do to be successful?
Communicate.
All right, get to doing it. You have 3 minutes to strategize, and then we're going to do round 1. Come up with your strategy.
51, 52, 53.
I just applied for a position yesterday.
Oh,
so I was
cool.
going to ask you about that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Count their penalties.
Perfect.
Okay. How long it takes them and how many penalties. You
got it.
Yeah, and then we'll just do 3 rounds. 2 or 3 rounds. Yeah. All right, y'all. Your strategizing time is at its limit. Is there anything else you need to talk about before your round 1 starts? Okay.
Listen up, guys.
All right, y'all, this team's got a question. Woo! You got it? 1 minute, 20 seconds. Julie, how much time did they? Oh, we had 1 second. You had 2 penalties, and they had 1. So your time is 1 minute and 31 seconds. Your time is 1 minute and 25 seconds. All right. I'm very excited. You've done a great job with this task. But my question for you is, we're talking learning agility, y'all. We're talking about leading. Can you lead this team to get faster? Because I'll tell you what, both teams are approximately, you're about 35 seconds away from the record. So you did quite well. Y'all are about 35 seconds away from the record, and each team had penalties. How do you minimize penalties? What do you need to communicate for people to know what they're doing? All right, Julie, let's give them one. We'll give them less than 1 minute, and we'll start round 2.
74.
36.
31, 32, 33,
80.
You did get, yeah. You got it? All right, woo! All right, this team had 1 penalty still. After their penalty, their time, 47 plus 5. 52 seconds. How's this team doing? Oh my gosh! All right, y'all. So you're okay. This is your last round. What do you need to do to get faster, y'all? You had 1 penalty, and it was a different reason this time. What was it? Your penalty this time was you had 2 people go after the same number. What do you need to do?
Know your number.
Okay. What do you need to communicate? For you sitting down, y'all, your knees can go over. That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, no problem. Yeah. Yep.
All right, I'm ready.
You still had 1 penalty, but you were down to 30 seconds. You just beat the record. Good job. 2 penalties. Oh, all right, y'all. Ooh, we had a difference. Yeah, we had a difference there, but 2 penalties. All right, so our total time after penalties and all, 42 seconds. Yep. Yeah, you guys were at, 53 seconds. That is still awesome, under a minute. What did it take for you? You're welcome to stand. You can sit down wherever you want, but let's unpack what you just did. Okay. Yep, okay. But let's give one big round of applause right there, Ruth. Wow, y'all, for all of you. Okay. Because we just took a group of people taking a quick refresher course to get jazzed about leadership, and we just turned a group of people into a team. What was your team's goal?
to win.
Yeah, boy. Huh.
Get your numbers in order the fastest.
Yeah, right? So some it started with let's just do the task, hit every number as quick as we can. It converted into winning, right? Some of you might have defined winning. It was interesting to watch how you responded to beating both yourself in your prior round, or on this side when y'all were like, ooh, we're this close. We're 4 seconds away from the record, right? So I was watching competition actually be quite healthy. In the real world, how does competition turn unhealthy?
Some people cheat.
Oh, very, very true.
It's not nice, but
That's reality. Yeah, right? Oh, sometimes in an organization, we can pit our people against each other, right? And often we can do it in ways we're not even realizing. So, but I like the fact that within both teams, y'all were working as a team, right? I loved the fact when I was hearing you unpack, what happened, how did we get our penalties, no one was like, Becky messed up, right? You were able, I was like, wow, that shows me a lot about you as leaders, right? You're not pointing fingers at people. You began to investigate the process. Right? So instead of blaming Becky for anything, we're saying, by the way, I don't even think there's a Becky. If there is, just know it's. Just know I'm not picking on you, Becky. But I want you to think about, instead of blaming Becky, you were able to look at a process and how you function together, right? To point out, hey, here's what caused our penalty. And it was either two people in at once or one person coming in while the other was out. So you were able to explain your challenges through how your communication broke down. That was quite impressive as an observer, right? But I asked you what you were supposed to do. Some of you said we're supposed to hit all the numbers, all 50 plus numbers. Some of you are saying we're supposed to win, right? What did it take for you to do that? I dig it, absolutely. Tell me more about it. What's one of the first things you had to do as a team?
Communicate.
What? Absolutely. What are you guys saying? Who's doing what? So, all right, you guys had to get on board on saying, hey, we are a team. Here's our shared goal to do this as quick as possible. And then that conversation should have moved to who does what, right? And in this exercise, who does what translated into what? That's a lot of what's in one sentence. But what? Speed, and it ultimately got us there. But I think there was a precursor, right? What numbers, y'all? You began to, and in our world, yeah, y'all, this is, yes, right? Yes, absolutely.
See, and so like I told somebody, I knew it was closer to me, but I could not see the number. I was like, y'all are gonna have to yell at me because I really honestly couldn't see it, and I couldn't remember the number because I couldn't see it.
Yeah.
So.
I love that, Krista. Guess what you just showed? Self-awareness in the middle of that exercise, right? You were aware. Hey, my challenge is, right? You guys were showing self-awareness. We got only 1 foot back here. My body's built like this. It's hard for me to move. You were actually showing this awareness. And Krista, you're like, hey, I can't see that, right? Without you being willing to communicate that, it's going to be really hard for your teams to clarify the roles, given they don't understand your limitations. So I hope both teams did that, right? Hey, I can't reach that one. Can you get this one? But fundamentally, your conversation had to convert to who's going to own which numbers, right? And in the real world, that is the clarification of roles and responsibilities on our teams. And sometimes I wish it was that easy. Yes, ma'am?
Our team had a role change.
Oh!
Which was really impressive because we were trying to strategize a little bit better. So somebody was hollering the numbers, and one person was stepped out and wasn't even touching a number. So her role had to change. She had to step because he couldn't do both.
Oh.
Which was excellent.
That is excellent, Megan, right? And then to think about what you're making me think about right there is, every time we got a new player on the bus, our teams change. And in the real world, what does that require us to do? Renegotiate roles and responsibilities. And by the way, we got to rebuild that team, develop the trust and vulnerability that's needed, right? Because every time a player changes, it changes. But absolutely, so not only did we clarify roles one time, we did it multiple times. And sometimes when teams begin making those changes, that usually causes more problems. And so what did your teams have to do after you made that change?
To adjust and get on board and just kind of get in and do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I bet really that reiterating, hey, this is what I'm responsible for, this is what you're responsible for. Yeah, right? So you had to clarify roles in your communication. What else did you have to do to be successful as a team?
We kind of changed the strategy to where there was one person calling out the numbers, and we changed it to where everyone had a voice and everyone called out the number that they hit, which was a better strategy for us.
I love it. And girl, you're talking learning agility, right? Which is something I was hoping would come out, right? For I wanted you between your rounds to look at your process and figure out is there a bottleneck? What can we do about it? Are there points of synergy? And how might we leverage them? Right? So I love that you did what I was hoping you were going to do. Slow down and reflect and do a better job the next round. Speaking of points of synergy, Right? Everybody, sometimes it's a buzzword, right? 2 + 2 = 5. We're amazing. How do we actually make that happen? But when we think about synergy, Paul and I tried to make it happen by putting a couple numbers really close to each other, like the 10 and 11. Now, we didn't do it the whole board that way, but on each board, there's just a couple points that in hopes you'd be able to see, oh, okay, and maybe you'd have to adjust your roles and person touches 10 and 11 instead of their prior plan, right? But part of it is, could you find your own pain points? Could you find points of synergy? And could you adjust your process? And if so, how the heck are you going to communicate? It became question number 1. Our next question. Now, let's talk about, having a conversation about different personalities, and so how did you ensure, we've got some extroverts in the room, we got introverts in the room, we got people high structure in the room, we got highly flexible people in the room, we got people highly open to change, not as open to change, all right, because we're in a room of people, and there's a lot of variability on these personality traits, and by the way, that shouldn't scare us. Right? The highest performing teams have personality variability. But what does that mean for us as leaders? We got to communicate through it. Right? And so if we think about the personality differences, how did each team go about making sure that extrovert just didn't take over, start barking process and orders? How did you ensure that there were multiple voices? Because that was another strong point that I observed. How did you ensure extroverts just didn't take over? One person just didn't.
I think we just listened. We listened to everybody's ideas and picked what worked.
Man, Charlotte, I wish everybody was like that. Yeah. Right?
I just sort of stepped back because everybody was like, oh, well, let's do it this way or let's do it this way. And I'm like, to myself, I said, you guys are making it too complicated. And then I just stepped back because they were doing what they needed to do. I didn't feel like I could contribute anything, so I just stepped back and watched.
Yeah, I appreciate you being so honest with that, right? Because my God, that happens all the time in teams, right? And then my next question begins to be, okay, hey, if we're looking, because we've stepped back, does that give us a good view that we could actually go back and step back in and benefit the team? Hey, you guys might not be able to see the game board, but I'm standing on 2 chairs. And by the way, here's what that might mean, right? But I really appreciate your honesty because in the real world, we're going to have personality different, all types of things that will lead to some people to stepping back, right? And some of that could be a great thing. Again, the internal processing, the different view. So how do we begin to leverage that and bring them in? How'd you guys? Y'all have a lot of talking. Y'all were going. Like, yeah.
As the extrovert, I was a caller, and that helped to get it started, I think. But then got the suggestion, why don't we all call? And I stepped back like that.
I love that about you. Because think about if an extrovert without the self-awareness refuses to step back, right? And so I love the fact that you said, hey, as an extrovert, I had to realize it wasn't my time to shine. And I had to be okay with doing allowing the rest of the team to step up. And my gosh, talk about 2025 leadership, shared leadership. That is it, right? But when you've got so many people talking, because you handled it different. They had some people stepping back. They were a little quieter. Y'all had people all in and a whole lot of talking. How'd you navigate that energy productively? Because you did it, right? But how'd you ensure that activity didn't get derailed by, side conversations, people talking over other? How were you still effective despite everybody being over this board and everybody talking at once?
We all listened to each other, even though there was a lot of conversations. I saw a lot of people looking to their left and right and asking questions too, like I did with you. Do you have these numbers? This is my numbers. And just looking at the whole picture.
Yeah, I like that because, we're talking about communication, but in a different way. Right? We might have had the one person saying, here's the vision and the plan, and then what happened just in reality, small team takes off their little piece, navigates their stuff, and so I like it. You guys said, hey, despite being on one team, we were able to still consensus, even in our small groups with our partners right next to us, to make sure really everybody was on board. Right? Because think about anybody I have no idea what our plan was or what we were doing? Yeah, thank you. Did you say a word about...
Everybody was talking, and then somebody gave me a question But I was okay with it.
No, well, thank you for being so honest too. Right? Oh, that's so real world, right? I mean, when do we stop as leaders and take the pulse and make sure our people are actually in it and get it? But it is a problem in a leadership role if our teams don't answer this, what are we supposed to do the same way? Right? In our world, it's deliver excellent programs, but it's a problem if people on our team don't know that's what we were supposed to be doing last Thursday. All right? Our teams need to have a clear and shared understanding of the goal. Go ahead, yeah.
I think working within your capabilities, knowing what numbers that you can touch, but allowing everybody else to step up and work within their capabilities, because I don't know what your capabilities are, until you take that lead, but also staying open to someone saying, well, I can't reach that number. It's like, okay, I'll give it a shot.
Yeah. I love that, Rick, because y'all, I've seen some teams do this, and their first solution is, oh, we're just going to let one or two people touch them all. And I'm here, I know, right? I'm here for round one is 10 minutes. I'm like, oh my gosh, right? Because that team didn't even think the way Rick thought, right? Yeah, one or two people think I can do it all. The rest of these people are just going to get in our way, right? And so I love the fact that I watched a group of leaders behave totally different, right? It wasn't anybody getting in our way. We're figuring out how are we going to do it together. And that's going to require me to do this and you to do that and us to change this along the way, right? But Rick just tied it right back. And many people miss the physical strengths piece. I love the fact that your team didn't. That's how strengths show out here. We've got some strengths in the strategy planning, but a lot of the strengths are figuring out, hey, can this leg reach that, or do I need to move, or whatever. So I love the fact that you recognize physical strengths component. Right? What else? Is there anything else that you think contributed to your success?
Well, I noticed that when we had the person calling it out, which was very helpful, we had people thinking it had been touched and anticipating and jumping ahead, and we had two people in at the same time. So I was like, if we call it out once we've done it, like if they're still going to call the number, we call it as we do it to know that it's done. But I noticed that the anticipation part, for the person that may move a little slower, instead of waiting for it to be done, they're, jumping in. And I think that's a typical team problem, which is they're thinking about what they're supposed to be doing, and they're jumping ahead versus, working with the person in front of them that may be going a little slower and maybe didn't see it. Like for me, I was like, I know I'm not going to jump on that number. Y'all are going to have to yell at me because I can't see the number, And they did. I mean, I was like, but, everybody had their part, but I think the anticipation part was coming, so we had to figure out a different method there.
I love that, and honestly, they did too, right? Because that was one of their exact penalty and challenge points was one person being in and the second person coming in. And that becomes a point we got to watch for. Our eye and our process does need to get that tight in this exercise. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, if you were our CEO, we as a team on this side should have been empowered to say, hey, you gave us too small of a time window. So it seems like we would love to try again because we are still working through our processes. I believe that this team could get, I really, really do. Yeah.
The CEO has chosen to promote you. I like that wisdom. Yes.
But also listing some of the challenges we had, like some of us had a light reflection on the sheet, you couldn't see the numbers. Or you didn't have enough space to stay back and go in at the right time without going over the line.
Well, now we take this.
Not making excuses.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it is excuse. But still, there's sometimes you're given a task to do, and your leader don't give you all the
absolutely
whatevers to make it happen.
Absolutely, right? I thought he raised, what's your name?
Stephen. You changed the rules in the middle of the game.
The CEO says you're fired, okay? But but no, I love this because this really was, while we're laughing about it, I did it purposely to his side.
Oh, okay.
We were looking at each other. He asked me a question that I knew one answer would make it much harder on his team. And he knew probably it was about to get hard. And so, but y'all, in all reality, your team did a great job. I changed the rules after your round one. right? And you could have balked at me and complained, and I would have fired you. But rework that process now. But no, right? Your team handled that hiccup like champs, right? But now if we begin to go back to this, y'all, right? And even I think the connection here. How do we create space back in the real world where our people can tell us, hey, you haven't resourced me enough. My butt's against the wall, right? How are you as leaders creating space where they can give you that feedback? You giving them that feedback, we know enhances intrinsic motivation, right? But you getting it is going to create a culture, right? So I'm really going to encourage you, and all of the research on employee engagement shows that it goes from roughly like 30%. This is sad stuff, y'all. 1 in 3 people engaged at work just on the nature of their job, right? Engagement scores go up to almost 80% when leaders give feedback consistently, that 5-to-1 stuff, y'all. Give feedback consistently and receive feedback openly, right? 30% engagement to 80%, right? And so I just want you to think about, I would encourage you after being with you this morning, y'all, how do you create the dynamics that you've created in this room with your teams back at work, right? You behaved like 2 very healthy teams. You didn't even start competing with each other. I actually was quite impressed. You all recognized their innovate, which by the way, y'all, great job. Getting down as close to the game board usually leads to the quickest amount of time. And that's where we can get 60 numbers tapped in 45 seconds. And that kind of goes back to the physicality piece. But I loved it. That team did it. They did it quietly. You didn't try to hide it or anything from that side. And then people looked over and they're like, oh yeah! And so I'm really going to encourage you again. Even that wouldn't have happened if you weren't looking out, trying to be aware for opportunities for innovation, right? And so try to spot them. All right, y'all, we're probably pretty much right at the nick of time. I want to leave you a few minutes. Do you have any burning questions on your mind? Influence, agility, communication, learning agility, leadership, anything you want to talk through? Yeah.
Will we have access to the slides that
Yes, I'll send them to Paul. Yep, yeah. Actually, you'll have to get them down from UT Vault. All our rules are weird and different now, but yes. Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
There's currently about a large team change. A lot of people have different job roles and taking on new tasks and definitely having to be agile and adapt. We've got one team member who's just dragging their feet through the mud, not performing well, but every time, we have weekly team meetings on what's going wrong, where do we need to step in, what training opportunities are needed. And the feedback I get is, no, I'm good, I just need to do it. He's not doing it perfectly, but where can I go with that? When does it stop being gentle love and tough?
Oh, I wish I could give that you an answer. That's uniquely to you.
Yeah.
Honestly, what's your name?
Abby.
Abby? I would have thought that already doing Anthony. Okay. But I want you to think about it. You're not at the point yet where you want to say, hey, this is now a pattern of behavior where I'm seeing consistent avoidance of accountability. Okay. This is the last time we can have that conversation. Because the next time, if you don't do this by this, here is the consequence. Nancy would already be at the point where it's accurate. So I want you to think about what is your life. But there is nothing wrong. I think we'll try to share with you there is nothing wrong with setting expectations only to be accountable to you. I think it's unfortunate we kind of live in a culture where people are a little bit afraid of accountability. But y'all, it's a beauty. Right? Yeah, absolutely. And same thing, Abby. If you want to talk through every specific detail, I'm happy. Just call me.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, totally.
How would you encourage leadership, like people we've talked about, to people on your team who don't have leadership positions? To show that.
I love that. Yeah. I truly believe, and there are people in my field that disagree with me, So this is just I'm speaking for Nancy, not for anybody else, right? How I'm going to answer this question. I believe that every person has the potential to lead. Does everyone like it? No. Are they always going to? But every person, I believe, has potential to show leadership, that process piece. And so I personally would go about, because they don't have positions of leadership, I would talk about and cultivate conversations around how leadership shows up amongst our team and what it could look like, right? And here's the opportunity, here's what leadership can look like even when you don't have a title, right? And when they're showing it, I would start to recognize and reward that. Yeah. Same thing. I'd be happy to talk to you one-on-one about the context. Yeah, totally. Yeah, because that's the thing. Leadership is so super contextual, Maybe in the future we'll do a session on leadership style and we can really unpack the context. That'd be fun. Oh, any other thoughts, questions, comments? Yeah.
You referenced 2 different books. What was the first one?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't remember. Susan Cain's Quiet. Susan Cain's Quiet was one of them. Robert Cialdini's. And if you want the Cialdini one, I'll do the same thing. I'll send the Cialdini article because it's shorter than the book and it's got all the wisdom in it. Yeah, so, okay, slides and Cialdini article. Yeah, you're welcome. Cool.
Thank you, Doctor.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah. Thanks, y'all.